All right. Thank you guys so much for being here today. This is Deadria speaking from the Washington State Coalition, and we're going to be doing our staff retention webinar today. And I have the lovely June Loveall here.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. We're so excited to be doing this with you guys today. We've been working on this for the past several weeks, and I think we've put together a pretty good little program here.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of things we want to start off with. We have some interpreters, so keep in mind that occasionally if you respond to some things, we've got to make sure our interpreters are up to speed and they're translating the information, so keep that in mind. I'm so glad that you guys are attending today. We do expect you guys to participate a little bit in the chat box, so we'll have some questions for you where you can chat back. It's just June and I sort of going through the chat box, so we might need a minute or two to write down some notes so that we can respond to your thoughts that you put in the chat box. So yeah. Again, there might be a pause here and there just for us to.
Yeah, we have upwards of 50 people registered for this, so. And we do, we really do hope this is somewhat interactive. So if you chat or type into the box, whatever we want to call it, know that we're seeing it. There's two of us and we're looking at this big, huge screen, and we will get to your question or your comment.
So we're gonna go ahead and get started here. If you have any questions before we get started, feel free to put that into the box.
Why doesn't hey, can a couple of you just say hi or tell us
if you saw what was it this morning?
It's the blue moon and the lunar eclipse, right? Is that what we're looking for today?
I called it the orange moon. June's like, no, it's the blue moon.
It's the blue moon, I think. Anyway, can you guys, some of you anyway, just type into the chat box so we can see what that's going to look like here. Okay, we see your names. Don't make us call you out. Hello from Lexington. Hang on, let's move up a minute. Hi, Sammy.
I think we can move that box out here.
Oh, look at all this. Okay, now see, this is what I like doing. Oh, good. You can, hi, lovely. Oh, Sarah slept and missed it. That's okay. Hi, Susie Fody, you beautiful woman. Lexington, Kentucky. What? Wow, that's exciting. All right.
Oh, great. Well, then you can spread the word about this webinar and how fantastic it was. But if you didn't like it, just keep it to yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Our names are Kelly Starr and Judy Chen.
Right.
That's who we are. Okay, great. The chat box is working. I don't dare move this thing because I feel like I'll blip the whole thing out.
Okay, let me see. Okay, we are like let me see if I can do it. Yay!
Okay,
I did it. Now we can see your questions.
Hang on, I need to see it, and it's over there. We need to switch sides.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
All right. So,
you want to switch?
Yes. It's like a clown car up in here. Okay.
All right, so let me just go through a couple of slides here.
Oh, hold on, Christine Wall, is it working for you? We see your chat, Christine. Kira says, let's get it on. Yes, let's get it on. Let's get this going. Okay, Christine, you can see it. Okay, thank you.
All right. So it looks like you guys know how to do this whole webinar thing. You've got this down. I have some instructions here just in case some folks might be having a couple of challenges. So listening, it's best if you listen through your computer speakers. Remember to mute them so we don't hear any of the background noise. So that would be great. But you can also use your phone. So participating, please feel free to use the question box to communicate. That's kind of how we're going to communicate back and forth. You'll probably type in your questions. We'll just probably respond verbally. So please feel free to use the chat box.
And also, if you don't want us to say your name, tell me because we can see your name.
Your control panel, if it minimizes to the side of the screen, just make sure you click the orange arrow and you'll get it back. attendance evaluations. I always ask everyone to please fill out the evaluation at the end. As much as we love great feedback, we also want to know things like, what did we miss? Could we talk about more of X and we didn't? Can we do a webinar on this next time? We love that kind of feedback. So just give us your feedback, because that's kind of how we do what we do. We listen to you, and we want to know what you want, and that's what we try to give you. So, all right. So how many years is considered a long-term employee to you? So we're going to really do some conversation here about staff retention and what that means. So,
so this is the interactive part. So please type into your chat box. Yes, we have advanced to the slide. The slide we were on should say, how many years is considered a long-term employee to you?
Oh, I see. I see what you're saying. I get it. I get it.
So we're working on that. Thank you. I am seeing some responses here, and it looks like a lot of folks are saying 5 years. 5 years. And we are working on the slide advancement thing, so sit tight.
So
really consistently 5+ years is what you consider long-term. Okay. And I guess from my point of view, 5 years is a super long time in this field, especially in terms of hiring younger staff who tend to use DV programs as a stepping stone, either to along their education path or career path, that a lot of folks don't stay on 5 or so years. So, okay. We have some 8 years plus responses. That's great. Okay. And we're still working on the slide advance issue, so thanks for your patience. Don't worry, Eileen, it's not just you. We are seeing that it's not advancing. Sarah, yes, we do have actually several pieces about the generational differences. So,
what if you blow it up, like do the this thing, and then go back to here?
again, sorry for the pause here. We're just trying to get these slides to advance so you see them. We're seeing it. Make sure that the button at the top says play, not pause. Susie, you see the change?
There it goes.
Yes, Eileen sees it as well. Good. Okay. Success. Yeah, we can.
Okay.
We got it. That was Becca, our wonderful technical support here, that we had a last minute scramble because we realized we didn't even have speakers. So Becca hooked us up. All right. So we were talking about how long do you think is considered long term? And it looked like 5 years was the overall average. And yeah.
5 years.
5 years. Some people said 8+, but looks like 5.
It's interesting because I think that too. Sometimes when I do interviews, when I was doing interviews before, I always thought about, like, one of the questions I would ask folks is, you know, what do you consider a long-term employee with us? Like, how long do you plan to be here? And some folks would raise their eyebrows and they would really think about it. And most people said 3 to 5 years. And I always thought if I could get 2 good years out of someone, I would be happy. Unfortunately, that's kind of sad that we think that way, right? Like, gosh, if I could only get 2 good years. But,
well, it takes a year to figure out where the bathrooms are.
Right.
So, I mean, 2 years is nothing.
Right, exactly. So, you know, if we can get 5 and 8 out of folks, I think that's amazing. What's key about getting 5 to 8 years out of people is really, to me, all about training, support, connection, you know, how you work with your staff, what that looks like, what that consists of. We're going to talk a little bit about that today, but I do believe you can get 5 to 8 years, even 10 years out of people, because when people are happy and love their job and know what they're doing, they're going to stick around. And so we're going to talk a little bit about like what makes folks happy. What do people want?
And I think, I mean, the really simplistic answer to this is think back to the best boss you ever had in your whole life, right? One that you were happy to come to work, you had open and clear communication, just the best boss you ever had, and do that. Right? Just do that. And then think of the worst boss you ever had, and we've all had one of those, and don't do that, right? I mean, that's really simplistic, but essentially, you know, we do have role models, both good and bad, that we help shape how we manage teams. And I also think your own personality, your own characteristics absolutely play into it, as well as that of your very diverse team who have very diverse personalities as well.
Yeah, and thinking about like you could write a list of all the great things your great supervisor did for you, and then you could write down a list of things that really didn't work in whatever job you were on that you just felt like you weren't supported. And think about what it could have looked like for you if you were actually supported, and recognize that that's just kind of what people want in this work. They want that support. So it's, you know, you could just write a list.
Mm-hmm.
So staff retention, what does it mean? Retain, and I wanted to be clear, like, what does this mean, Jim? What are we talking about here? Retaining productive staff members that are positive addition to the team and open to learning new skills.
And the key word here is positive addition. And we know that there are several programs across the state that have some negative team members and are trying to manage that as best they can. But again, in terms of retention, a positive addition to the team and somebody that's actually open to learning new skills.
Yes. Isn't it expectation that there's high turnover? I mean, I think oftentimes if we sort of wish that upon us, it's kind of going to happen. But we've got to work towards moving towards a direction that's not going to happen. We're not going to think in that direction. However, there is going to happen to be some turnover. High burnout. And what about staff that won't leave and is past their time?
So yeah, we know about this one. This is not new to any of us. And I think it's a real balance, and it's an ethical issue almost, because we've got the mothers of the domestic violence movement who hold all that history, and they're just treasures to programs. Sometimes they've moved on to be on the board, but you're balancing that against the new feminists that we have working on our staff. And it's hard. And you look at management, and you look at how, not even across our state, but across the nation, domestic violence directors tend to be older white women. It's just how the demographic skews. So we are dealing with that reality, and we're also dealing with really trying to train and coach and bring up young women of color to be able to take over these programs. And if we're not even talking about women of color, we're just talking about young women in this field. A lot of older women are having a hard time stepping aside,
letting go.
Yes.
And this is so important because we talked about how sometimes you might recognize that it's kind of time. Like it's time for you to maybe step aside, do something different, and it's really challenging for you. But the other way to look at that is, are you making room for others to grow? Are you sharing? Are you teaching? Are you mentoring? Because that information has to be passed on. We don't want the history to get lost. We want it to get passed on to others. And are you making room for others to possibly fill in that seat when you go?
Right.
So I think that's important to think about.
Right, and we don't want to hear, as a result of this webinar, 5 people decided to leave the agency. That is not what we're about. Because when you do make that conscious decision to step aside and let a younger person come up, there's a retention. There's retention plan, not retention planning, succession planning. That's the word I'm looking for. Succession planning. And that just doesn't happen in a week, right? It's a very thoughtful, mindful process. You're working with your board about, how to roll out the next phase of your agency.
Yeah. And I think, the thing about mentoring folks and knowing when it's time, and I'll totally be honest, when I was working for New Beginnings, I worked at the shelter for 10 years as a manager, and I loved my job. However, I probably told myself every day that I loved my job. So I also convinced myself that this was the best thing since sliced bread. And so sometimes you avoid really paying attention to the cues of maybe it's time for you to move on and let someone else do this job. I got really comfortable. I know what I needed to do every day. And so I talked myself into staying. The other thing was that there was a fear of learning something new. I didn't want to learn anything new. I wanted to stay where I was at because I was comfortable. And I really decided to challenge myself. And I took the position over at the community program. And I had been the manager there for 8 years. And I got comfortable again. I was like, whew, I can do this in my sleep. And I did not think about going anywhere. And I realized when the opportunity for the coalition came, I thought, I got to make room for someone else. I've done what I came to do. I was there for 8 years. I did the best that I could, and now it's time. And I think sometimes our fear holds us back and we get too comfortable. And we really should step out of that zone and challenge ourselves.
Right, and plus Deidre had me on the sideline going,
I sure did.
Deidre, it's time. It is time to move on. And we didn't spend any time actually doing any introduction of ourselves, but Dee and I worked together at New Beginnings for 17 years. So we have a long history working for a fantastic organization for someone who we both consider a mentor and one of our best supervisors ever. And I think we both learned a lot and molded a lot of how we led teams because of Lois. But I moved on from there as well and became the regional director for the YWCA in South King County. And then Deidre eventually moved over here to the coalition. But again, I was telling her for years, I think it's time to leave New Beginnings, because when you max out at a place and you can do it in your sleep, there's a comfort to that. But then there's also the flip side of maybe that's not the best thing, right? And it's hard to jump off a cliff and do something that you're not super comfortable with. But that's, I think, Dee's own experience of, in my own experience of going to a new place after being someplace for so long, it's really stressful.
Right.
But
but it's a great challenge and it's a great opportunity. And we stay still in the work.
Yes.
I mean, we didn't work at Walgreens. Not that I love Walgreens because they have everything, right? Yeah. But we stayed in the work and we kept doing the work. So I think we valued this work.
And then for me, I retired 2 years ago, which was talk about jump off a cliff. I mean, that was a huge life decision that I made. But I'm also, it's not leaving something. It's what are you working toward? What do you want to stay connected with? And so for me, it's the coalition. After serving on the board for so many years, I realized that this was the agency that I really wanted to focus my attention and passion toward. And so being able to do this as a volunteer has really, filled my tank. I don't know what you want to call it, but it keeps me involved in programming. It keeps me involved with the kind of people I want to be surrounded with in my life and talking about things that I know a little bit about.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
there are ways to do it.
Yes. And we can talk about that if you want to have conversation about that.
Yes.
So staff turnover. So when you registered, we sent out a questionnaire and asked folks like, what does it look like in your agency? What's your staff turnover look like? And we got a lot.
Well, I just want to say, we realized we didn't ask that question as detailed as we should have.
Right.
I mean, you learn along the way.
We got so many different responses of what that could sound like. So the response was, it was varied. Some people put 2, some people put a percentage, some people put 5, some folks put that they hired people, but some of those left and they had to hire more. They got more money, so they hired extra people. So the responses actually came in very different, which was interesting to me.
Right, and I think the differentiation was some folks got additional funding and were able to bring on new staff, or some folks lost funding and they didn't backfill. Our intent, which we did not do a good job of asking, was steady state. What was your turnover without any funding change? But again, our responses were across the board. At the beginning of this webinar, somebody posted that they had a 70% turnover. And my question is to you, is that in 1 year? And wow. 70% turnover is huge. And again, if you're a staff of 5 and 3 people left, it's very different than if you're a staff of 30. So I'm just curious, to the person that posted 70%, can you just give a little more detail? Size of staff, how many people that was, and whether that was within a year. And we would love to know, for those of you that did respond, what was your turnover literally out of how many staff? If you could just type that in your chat box, we will go back to that as well. We're going to keep moving forward, but we would love to get some actual numbers from you, just, hey, we have a staff of 10 and 3 left in the past 12 months, that type of thing.
Right. And if you know why, like, was it because the pay wasn't good enough? Was it because your agency money got cut? That's always very interesting, because how to really address why there's turnover can look differently. Like if you're hiring people and they're just leaving, then fundamentally there's something going on with the position or the pay, or something's going on. But if you've lost money and people are leaving, then granted, I mean, you got to let people go, then that's a different story. So we were just curious to know about that, but we got so many different responses. All right, so feel free to put anything in that chat box. So staff turnover common causes, and some of you already know some of this information, so we're just going to kind of go over it a little bit. So we know that low pay causes turnover, and it really takes, I'm going to just pause here for a second, because we know that it's super expensive to live in the state, and we know that most people have 2 or 3 jobs. So the thing is, like, that's not what we really want for folks, right? Especially because this work is so demanding. And so it really takes the agency to go back and look at, what does it cost to live in your community? What does it cost to grocery shop in your community? Put your kids in childcare in your community. Obviously, it can look different across, Washington State, but pay attention to what's going on in your area so that you're paying folks a decent amount that they can actually live on. Now, I'm not saying people probably still won't need to get a second job. However, I just, it's important that people are getting paid a decent amount, because we all know that once you throw in that insurance and it starts coming out, then you actually make less. And if you have more than 1 kid, you're making even less, right? So some of those things are something to think about when you think about low pay. Well,
and also, we understand the difference between court-based advocates and community-based advocates. And if you are working for a county or a city or an arm of the police department, those advocates tend to make a lot more money than community-based programs, and they could be making 20, 25 plus an hour, as opposed to the $16 an hour or less in community-based programs, and the benefits look much different. So in terms of a wage gap, there's a huge wage gap within our own programs, depending on where where your payroll is, right? You understand what I'm saying there. Just going to pause here for a second. So we've had a huge increase of staff in one program that started out a year ago with 5, and now they are a staff of 13. So that is a big ramp up.
That was one of the responses.
Yes, and we've got a team that went from 14 to 6. That's
wow,
a big reduction. Somebody has a staff of 27, 2 left due to client tragedy and couldn't emotionally deal with the work anymore. Very real, very real. Okay, thank you for those responses, you guys. Yeah, we just wanted to pause a second about low pay. We know that sometimes that is the hot button issue of paying a livable wage that is, commensurate with the community you live in. Because again, it's going to cost a lot less to live in Republic, Washington, as it is going to be living in Seattle or Tacoma, Washington.
Or Spokane. Yeah. Obviously, limited opportunity for advancement. You've got high stress. Things happen on these jobs, and it can create a lot of trauma.
Oh yeah, we just had 2 staff here leave. We saw. So,
yeah. Toxic work environment. That can be huge. We're gonna touch just briefly on that a little later. A limited flexibility with scheduling. We all know that people's lives are really important to them, and their families are important to them. And if they feel locked in and monitored and micromanaged, that could feel really uncomfortable. Guilt over taking time off for being sick, and no investment in the agency. So, I mean, I think one of the things that I talked about with June about is that I find if folks are not interested in the agency overall and they took a position for a job, they're probably not going to stay. And I think being transparent as an agency of what's happening in your agency, where you're moving, where you're going to, what changes are coming, having people invested in that process, having staff be a part of that process, keeps them interested and engaged, and keeps them around for a lot longer. There's not these 2 things happening, like the agency is moving forward and staff are still just doing what they're doing. It's a combination. Everyone's involved. Everyone has a voice, and they feel connected to the agency. So when you have buy-in and you have your staff are invested in what's going on, they're going to stick around a lot longer.
Right, and we have a great response here, somebody that works in the city, that the biggest feedback that they received when somebody left the program was about the high stress and the pay not being enough compared to other programs in the city, and that it's not realistic to expect advocates to afford to live in the city, and some of them have crazy commutes. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I remember at one point I was hiring folks and I was like, I'm only going to hire people that live in the proximity of this program. Because if it snowed, I'm like, who's coming in, right?
Right. No, I know. I admit I did that too when, hiring in Seattle, when I'd see people applying from Bremerton or, whatever, I would just hesitate with that because, that may work for a year. I think most anybody can do a commute for a year. But
when you pile on the trauma and the stress of traveling and the lack of pay and the staff drama, it's not worth it.
It's too much. Yeah. And if anybody is paying any attention, and I'm pretty much sure all of you are paying a lot of attention to what's going on, housing prices in Seattle are through the roof. And we've got somebody here that said they've got advocates commuting to Seattle from Tacoma. Now, if anybody knows what it is like to drive on I-5 in the morning and then in the evening, that's insane. That's an hour plus each way.
Right.
The rise of opioid epidemic and the shift in focus from DV to substance abuse work. Oh, wow. Okay.
Great.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of advocates are dealing with multiple symptoms that, the folks were trying to help, and definitely drugs and alcohol has always been part of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think what's challenging us is we also have to learn how to work with lots of people who are experiencing various things. And some of it's new to us. We need more training so that we can train our staff. Job descriptions are, this is someone is typing in the chat box. So it says job descriptions are unrealistic for some to manage workloads and also have time to take care of themselves. And that's so true. I mean, I always joke, and I'm sure some of you heard me always say that there's that one line at the end that says other duties as assigned. And really, it's true. There are many other duties that will be assigned that don't even come up in the job description or the job announcement, right? And so we should really think about what we're saying when we say that. Like, are we piling on too much for folks to actually manage and to do with the little bit of money that they're getting? So is it worth it?
And we do have a couple of slides about vicarious trauma a little further in. So we're going to talk about this in more detail in a few minutes.
Did it go? Did it go? Hello. Hold on. Trying to advance the slide here. There we go.
Okay, the cost of staff turnover. I don't know if any of you have ever thought about this or figured out the math, but basically it is 30% of their annual salary, and that doesn't account for lost productivity or the cost of hiring and training. So, that's just simple math. That's how much it costs when one person leaves your team. And the other thing that it does, we didn't mention here, but is true, is time, right? And your time is so valuable. And the time of the staff that are still employed with you, that are covering for the person that left. And you particularly feel this sting in 24-hour shelter coverage programs, right? If you've got somebody off the swing shift that leaves and you may have a very limited on-call staff, your staff is going to feel this pinch. And that's where you get a lot of the pressure to hire quickly, which is the wrong thing to do, right?
And please feel free to chat in the chat box if you have something to say about this, because I truly believe that hiring takes a lot of time. And most of you know that I did a webinar on hiring, and I've gone around and done it in person. But I tell you, hiring is actually a lot of work. But it's work to get what you need, what you want, and what's going to work for your agency. And I do believe that when you put the time into it, the results are awesome. But however, it does take time. And how many of us have that kind of time? It's so hard, especially when people have left. You're scrambling to cover shifts and you're scrambling to move people around, and the hiring process can just take a long time. But
it essentially takes 6 weeks.
Yeah.
It takes 6 weeks if you do it right.
6-week process, and then you've got to train.
Right.
That's right. Yeah.
So we have a great comment here from Christine, who actually has some hard numbers for us. Just want to share. So average length of employment, or actually She had 32%, last 5 years, let me just back it all the way up. In the past 5 years, 32% turnover. That's a third of her staff left. The average length of employment for the people that left was 2.5 years. 33% of that, they moved out of town. 12.5% left because the work was too emotionally challenging. One staff member was terminated, and the remainder left to take other jobs with more pay, mostly to the two local universities. So thanks for those great numbers, Christine. But that's a great example of turnover and how and why and how much and why it happened.
And realistically, you have to think, if someone's applying for a job at your program, they probably actually have applied for other jobs as well, right? So they're hoping for the best. They want to pick the best job that's going to come. So we talked about, that it takes 6 weeks, but also if someone's going to give their other job 2 weeks, that's another 8 weeks. Then they come in and then they fill the place out, and if they don't like it, that's a week lost and they quit. Then you're back to the drawing board. So it does take time, and just making sure you're informing people of and you're having a great interview process, I think, is key. Exactly. On who you're going to hire.
But again, look at this happy rainbow, folks.
There is happiness in this land of.
There is. We have another great comment here that I want to share with you.
And I want to just say that we put this slide in here because when June and I were putting this together, we were talking about some of this, and some of it just seemed like, it was information that some of us already know. And it is true. We know a lot of this information, but how to apply it, and applying it takes time. It takes some work, but it is doable. And so we want folks to know that some of this information isn't going to be new to you. It's just really about how do you apply it.
And this comment here that I'm just going to paraphrase comes from Kira, who works, here in Seattle, but basically stating the absolute truth, which is that the homeless population here is, it's incredibly high. There are many, many chronically homeless people, and that they're misrepresenting their actively dangerous situation to screen into shelter, DV shelter. They are in danger, yes, but as you know, the shelter screening for domestic violence is very different. And the bottom line of that is getting residents in with super high needs that they are not equipped to serve, and a high number of clients with disabilities and children with disabilities. So yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I know we're seeing this in urban areas. If you're in a rural area, if you want to type in what's happening in your programs, that would be great. I'd love to share that as well. Okay. So let's talk about some concrete ideas to reduce staff turnover. We know all the big bad things, right? So we want to just shed some light and rainbows and hope on this situation and let you know that there are ways that you can reduce staff turnover. And of course, the first one money talks, right? If you can get your board to make sure to, well, one, figure out what the livable wage is in your community and bolster that with some actual really good benefits, you'd be amazed. And I think that's why you find so many DV advocates competing heavily when city and county and law enforcement jobs become open, because they're like, hey, I've got these skills. I'm a DV advocate. I'd rather go do that for 22 hours plus full benefit package, right? I mean, so, and I know it's hard for small programs, especially in small towns, to be able to do that and I think we see this, just to diverge for a second, at the annual conference, the coalition conference every September, when you all get together and talk to each other and meet new people. And I remember the first few times I went, I was shocked that smaller towns, their executive directors were making the same amount of money as line staff advocates in Seattle. I don't know why, but sheltered, I guess. But the first few times I heard that, that really sunk in about how smaller programs really, really are severely underpaid.
Right. Working with the bare bones.
Yeah. And maybe a staff of 2 or 3. Right. So taking all that into account around competitive pay, of course.
Right. And I think if you're impacted by that, it does require some conversation to sit down and really think things through for the next year, the next budget year. And things might not happen in the first year. Maybe they happen in the second year around budget. But as long as you're planning and thinking ahead, those changes will come, but you've got to start somewhere. And some programs are actually doing it pretty well. And so don't reinvent the wheel, but let's connect you with programs that are paying people a livable wage. and sometimes that could mean that certain positions don't exist anymore because
Mhm.
maybe it's not something that your agency needs. Maybe your agency is doing things that aren't really producing things in your community. You're going to look at things differently. You look at positions differently. Sometimes programs just need that shake up because times have changed. Our communities have changed, and we've got to actually adjust to what's happening within our community, within our state, and just paying attention to that change. So what does that look like?
And that's really scary stuff when you start talking about that. And you have to take the emotion out of it. And I know a lot of you are thinking, what do you mean take? That's what we're all about, is heart and soul and emotion and feelings, right? Yes, indeed. But there is an administrative bent through all of this, right, to keep this ship floating. And, you know, ship, like boat floating. Stop it. Anyway, and the analogy I heard is, sure, we want to make sure everybody is on the bus, right? But we want to make sure everybody's in the right seat on the bus, right? So there may be some programs that are not perhaps making money, but are not funded. And it's a really hard look on that. And you're going to be sitting around with your team and they're going to ask, am I about to lose my job? I mean, those are hard conversations, and there are ways to have those conversations. But I just think, taking a very business focused aspect look at your staffing and your contracts and what is actually doable, because we all have programs that are near and dear to our hearts that end up losing funding, and you don't want to let that person go. But it's again, that's a whole different situation in terms of conversations to have that we're not going to have today. But I just think it's important to keep that at the front of the conversation as well, because I think we do tend to get super emotional about it.
Yeah. And I think the pay is probably what really is the buzzword here. But there are other couple of bullet points here that I thought were important. We thought they were important. So flexible time off. If people can get it, give it. If you can give it to people. Training is so important. I hear all the time, I wasn't properly trained for my position. I hear that. I can't tell you how many times I hear that. And I think it comes from the fact that we hire people out of desperate situations and we kind of throw them into their jobs, kind of tell them what to do, ask them to shadow with someone, and they're hitting the ground running within a couple of days because we're desperate to fill a position. I'm hearing that is actually not working, and people are leaving because of that, and people are frustrated because of that. What I'm hearing is that people want training. They want to be connected with their supervisor. They want to spend a little more time actually understanding their position. I mean, when I came here, it took me a while. I mean, I would even say like 6 months to 8 months, not that more, to really figure out what the heck I was doing. And so you just, like you said, you got to find the bathroom first, right?
Mhm.
So,
and I think, as we've done trainings across the state, so many of us literally use the words, oh yeah, I was thrown to the wolves first week.
Oh,
and that was across the board, right?
Totally. Oh, I used to do it. I used to say, well, pick up the phone. You'll never know who's on the other end if you just don't pick up the phone, which probably wasn't the best, but I didn't have time. I was like, we got to learn this stuff quick. It's not the best way to train people. So you've got to put that into your training process. Check-ins, make sure you check in with folks because that's really important to them.
Enjoyable work environment. We skipped over that.
Oh,
right. And that's really important. Like if people feel like they're reporting to a hellhole, they're not going to want to come to work, right? So I think taking an objective look at the actual environment the people are reporting to every day, talking to your folks about, is this enjoyable? What would make it better? Can have a huge impact. And then I guess my final comment about this slide is try to figure out what doesn't cost you money to make somebody feel a little better about the job.
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
What does it cost you? What are some creative perks
Yes.
you can give staff? And you would be amazed. Well, maybe you wouldn't be amazed, but you would be amazed at how far that goes. And I'm going to bump back up to flexible time off. That is the easiest one you can do. If you're a supervisor on this call, on this webinar, flexible time off is a huge perk that staff that are caring for their parents or their children value more than anything. Just to know that they can, take their parent to their doctor appointment, or take their child, or go to their child's performance at the school in the middle of the day. Those things are very valuable to people. And I think, we're squeezed from both sides. We're squeezed from the older generation of our parents, and we're squeezed from the younger generation of our children. And I think just really recognizing that goes a long, long way. Yeah, great idea, Christine. Can we have you guys type in the chat box? What are some ideas for creative perks? Please don't think too much about it. Just what have you done? Or if you are not a supervisor, what would you have really appreciated as a perk? A non-monetary perk. What would have really helped you? Here, oh, great. Shut down a tad early on Friday. Tell staff it's a half day so they can count.
So they can count on their timesheet.
It's a half hour they can count on their timesheet. Okay, let's see. Holiday bonus. Okay, that's a rough one. Fun events, holiday party, eating together. A meeting that has nothing to do with work. We talk about that a little bit later. These are great ideas. Please keep them coming. But again, the time is golden. Time. If you can work out a way, even if you're rotating through your team, to give someone a Friday afternoon off, they know that in 4 weeks they're going to get a paid Friday afternoon off. The team goes out for a 2-hour lunch, whatever. Time is the thing that is going to really make folks happy. Promise you. Self-care lunches, yes, great idea. Always encourage time for their children and flex it out. Yes, flexible time around scheduling.
One of the things I used to do is when I would meet with staff for whatever, reviews or just check-ins, I would always ask, do you have any vacation planned? And if they said no, I would say why. And I would ask them, well, when we meet again, can you consider actually looking at your calendar and pick a couple of days that you want to take off? Because people will go on and on and on and on and not use their vacation or not take time off, and they just get burned out. So you kind of have to push folks to be excited about taking their time off and what that looks like. They don't have to go anywhere, but as long as they just take a couple of days off and rejuvenate, I think that's really good.
Well, I think taking a full week off, right?
Yeah.
If possible, because it's hard when you just do a long weekend. I mean, you can sure maximize a long weekend, but talking to them about, at what point this year can you take a full week off? And, we don't know their situation, of course, but you do. And you can talk to your staff about, because being away for at least a week has a huge benefit. Okay.
And we have to do it ourselves. So we also have to display that and do it to show that we're also taking time for ourselves.
Yes.
All right. So
more ideas. Staff planning day. Somebody talked about an event without work. This is kind of like that, but there is a little bit of work involved. But staff tends to really enjoy this, where you go off site and you have a planning day, and it's kind of just a moment to hit pause and talk about what you've been doing and what you want to do in the future, whether it's quarterly, half yearly, whatever.
And someone wrote manager scheduling breaks within staff work shifts. So yes, I think that's important. Making sure people don't always eat while they're working. They never leave their desk. They don't stand up all day. Judy always mentions this, who's the person that probably hasn't peed for 6 hours, and then finally when they do, they're like running, like a bat out of hell to the bathroom because they've been holding it all day. So just recognizing when people need to sort of take that break to step away from their work. And some of the other concrete ideas, transparency. I think I'm really into transparency because I believe when staff are sort of checked out about what's happening in the agency, if they get too far checked out, they will check out and leave, right? Because there's no connection. So, us as managers and staff, making sure that we're sharing information, what's going on, any changes that are coming.
Well, as much as you can.
As much as you can. Share what you can. You can't share it all, but inform people. People don't want to be blindsided and told that this huge change is happening and it's happening in a week. Like, people should kind of know some things, right? So we all don't like to be blindsided. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about your staff. And people should have a voice. I mean, there are going to be times when the agency is planning things, and it would be really helpful if you asked everyone, like, let's all have some input on this particular thing. They can't have input on everything, but there should be some moments where staff are involved and they have a voice.
And I think I've seen this work well and not work well in that if you're asking for staff input around budget, that you're really clear communicating with them. It does not mean these things are going to happen, increasing the staff by 5, for example. Be careful what you're asking for, because then they're going to feel like, oh, they didn't listen to me or they didn't take that seriously. Right. So I know that while I was supervising a team, I did not go that route. I did not ask them, what you would, if you had extra money in the budget, because actually, literally, that never, ever, ever happened, right? But staff gets really stressed out around budget time, and they know the budget cycle. And their number one question is somebody going to lose their job? And actually, what they're asking there is, am I going to lose my job? Right? So just to keep the information flowing as much as you can. Yes, it's budget time. Yes, we're working on things. I will let you know as soon as I possibly can. I can't talk about the details right now. They know. They're just pushing.
And it could be, it doesn't really have to be about money, but it could be that, that money has come and you're going to be doing something different. And how could people see it being spent?
Right.
What would it look like if we use this money?
Right. But again, be careful what you ask for, because that can turn around and bite you afterwards.
Too many mouths in the kitchen.
Well, they just think they have these fantastic ideas, and then if you don't implement them, they're really hurt. So. All right, so did we go? Yeah, we went through provide opportunities for input. Now we're going to talk a little bit about recruiting and hiring, which is huge and often overlooked. We talked about a 6-week lead-in, and that's talking about, advertising, actual interviewing, checking references, giving a person a couple weeks. If somebody says, hey, I can show up tomorrow, that's a huge red flag. They need to give their current job probably 1 to 2 weeks notice. 2 weeks is standard, but so the investment you put into hiring the right person results in longevity. And one of the things I know that we learned was hire slowly, fire quickly. Right? Hire slowly, fire quickly. And the hiring slowly part is, you don't want to rush this. It's going to take time. I understand if somebody leaves and you are stuck with a gaping 5-day-a-week shift at the shelter, you got to do something. But still, in the long run, it would help to get the absolute best fit into that position.
Right. And your gut's telling you when this is not a great fit, when it's not working. And that person's probably hoping that you can see it too. So don't linger it. Don't let it linger and have other people suffer on staff. Let them go if they have to go. Have that conversation that it's not working. This wasn't the best fit, or this wasn't the best match, or whatever it is. But when you know early on that it is not working, you've got to step in and do something about that.
Yes, because the rest of the team certainly knows, and then they're looking at you cross-eyed, going, does she not know? Why isn't she doing anything?
And the longer it takes, the worse it gets.
And in fact, you could be doing lots of things. In fact, you might have an HR program, a formal HR program. Okay, quit laughing, those of you who have no HR programs, but that you have to run through an HR process, and that can take time.
Right.
Before we skip ahead, hiring the right. Oh, I just lost my thought. Sorry, let's keep going. Hopefully it'll come back.
Well, I think you and I had talked about this part about making sure people know what they're walking into, having honest conversation rather than gossip. And we all know that stuff happens in the office. We're not saying like as soon as you hire someone, tell them all the gossip that's happening in the office. But be very clear, like if someone, there's been change in the office and people aren't feeling uncomfortable about the change. If there was a incident around DV in the workplace, or there was a homicide, like inform people, because gossip is not a good thing, and you want to just be upfront with the folks that you're hiring, what's happening in the office and what's the vibe.
Right. And I think the example I had in mind, and this was back at New Beginnings, where I think we changed things around the interviewing process, whether you do 1 interview or 2. And again, the second interview, what more are you really looking to find out, right? Second interviews can be a huge waste of time.
True.
But we had hired somebody and, did the interview process in the conference room, and she showed up for work the first day of work and literally left at lunch and never came back because she did not realize the office setup. She didn't realize that her desk was in the middle of like an open office kind of setup, and that she thought she would be in her own private office with a door. And so she was hugely disappointed, obviously, and just kept it going, never came back from lunch. But I think, what I learned from there is, walk that person through. Hey, this is where we are. These are the offices. These are the desks. Let people get a visual so they aren't shocked. So when they are weighing their options about where they want to work, because clearly, right, they're interviewing around if they're looking for a job, that this isn't the thing that's the stumbling point,
right,
that they know what they're walking into.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you have another thought? Did it come back to you?
No, that was it.
All right.
So vicarious trauma.
Right. And I know some of you folks have probably seen this diagram before, and just it's all over the place. And so I just wanted to bring it up. I can send you these slides. I think actually the slides are connected to this webinar, so you can download them if you'd like. And you can find this slide on the internet. I think Laura Vandernoot has it in her book. But I just wanted to bring up some of the things to think about when people are exposed to trauma. And in case you didn't know, here are some of the things to look for. Just being aware of that, being aware of when your staff are challenged, are maybe not showing up for work, feel overwhelmed, aren't going to the bathroom, aren't eating, aren't getting along with other people. If a shift changes, folks are probably experiencing something, whether it's personal or work related. However, there's an impact that's going to happen. And we also have to be aware of the signs of this trauma that are happening to people, because obviously this is what this work brings on occasionally, is some secondary trauma.
Well, I think the one that kind of jumps out at me on this one that I saw a lot was chronic exhaustion, physical ailments. If you've got a team member that is sick all the time, it's always something, that's worth taking a look at and having a conversation with, because so much of this stuff that's emotional can become physical, right? And we know a lot of people that we work with are dealing with anxiety because of the work we do. They're on some sort of medication, and just to kind of, whether they share that with you or not, just to check in with folks about, how they're doing. But if somebody is using sick leave once a month, I think that's a red flag to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Somebody that is constantly sick or never 100%, right? Always complaining, always tired, always stressed out. One, that's no way to live, let alone that's your way of life, right? So.
Right. Yeah. And I kind of jumped to the anger and cynicism because, well, there's a couple that I would probably pull out, but I just know that often I would see advocates feel very frustrated with our system. Folks would go out to get resources or services or legal support, and it just never happened, or the system seemed against their client. And, advocates just feeling hopeless, feeling frustrated. And that comes out in different ways, where they're just angry because they feel like, well, why am I even working with this client? Because nothing's ever going to happen for them because they get turned down and this program doesn't provide X, Y, Z. Or they're just, critical, and they're just unhappy and feeling like this is pointless. I can never do anything that's going to change the situation. So just thinking about that, that frustration that can come from folks who are advocating for our clients, where they just get really frustrated and get down because they feel like nothing positive is ever happening for the people that they're serving.
And for you too, right? For everybody that is in charge of programming and managing contracts and folks. I mean, it's a lot. Like, if you're recognizing 6 of these things, and you're dealing with them, well, here's our next slide.
Right.
The Employee Assistance Program, please type in now whether you have access to an Employee Assistance Program through your agency. We've got a couple of comments here that they're kind of just laughing that about a human resources department, that they are in themselves the HR department. We get it. We get it, totally. It's usually the office manager or some admin role that becomes the HR person. But let's see. Okay, we've got everything from yes, indeed, we have an EAP to I don't even know what that is. So, I mean, that's great, right? This is exactly what we expected. Employee assistance programs are part of a benefits package, typically through your health benefits, right? And that is when a third-party agency is paid through the agency to get you get referred. I'll just use me as an example, just to do the ABC. So I am a DV advocate and I'm really stressed out and I'm having a hard time coping with my personal life, let alone my professional life. So I need help. And so I go to my supervisor and say, I'm really having a hard time. And my supervisor, Deadria, says, are you interested in the Employee Assistance Program? And I said, well, what is that? And she explains to me that it's an outside agency that the program contracts with. And most importantly, EAPs do not report back to the agency. So they are not going to report back to Deadria what we talked about or what's going on, right? So that, I think that is one of the key things. It is a third party typically a therapist that will work with you through your issues. So again, especially it's around burnout, right? So number 2 here, know your resources to refer staff. If you are a supervisor, please take it upon yourself to figure out, do you have an EAP program, right? And if so, how that works with insurance, right? Because everybody's insurance coverage is different. Some programs are going to have it and some are not. Let's see, we have a couple of questions here. Yes, we provide our staff with EAP. I would like to know if other agencies have ways to promote their EAP with staff besides handing out the brochures and having the poster on the wall. My staff loves the EAP. I get a summarized yearly report of usage percent, no other info. It is used heavily. There you go. So what gets reported back to the agency is how many people used it, nothing identifying who used it, who sought out any sort of help, let alone what they talked about. So if you can type in right now, we have a request, other ways to promote EAPs if you have them.
And the one thing that I would do is obviously going back to, let me see if I can go back here for a second. Going back to, let's see, this slide. Wow, it's moving really slow. Okay, going back to this slide. I also, the way I kind of promoted it was if I saw any of these signs of this trauma, if I felt like a staff person was really struggling or there was something going on, I mean, your gut kind of tells you when something's going on, and you connect with them and you say, hey, why don't we meet today or tomorrow? Let's just check in, see how you're doing and see how things are going. And then that's an opportunity for you to talk about, well, I noticed that you've been really exhausted lately, or I noticed you haven't shown up for work, or you've been ill. Have you checked into your health insurance to see if there's anything that can support you with your health insurance or your coverage? And then you can also talk about, don't forget, our health insurance covers physical therapy, mental health support, acupuncture, blah, 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 whatever it covers, because sometimes people just have no idea. And I think we all know that our insurance, trying to tap into your insurance can be like a maze. So if you are aware of what the insurance covers, that could be great. You can have that conversation. Let's see if anyone.
Right, and so I think this brings me back to safety planning, how to safety plan effectively. If you just make it a matter of course, it's not going to feel like you're singling somebody out, like, right. Wow, you really look like you could use an EAP program. I'm just saying, right? No, you don't do that. When even if staff are talking to each other, they'll know that you've been talking about it with everybody. If you make sure it comes up at every single all staff meeting. Hey, you guys, I don't know if you're aware of this benefit, or I just want to remind you of this great benefit our insurance covers. We all know we work in high stress jobs. There's a lot riding on the line here, and it can really tax us. This is a great program. I really encourage you to reach out. It's confidential. We're not going to, whatever it is you need to say about your program, but just talk about it a lot. And people will use it. Right. But if somebody's got, if somebody asks you about it and you got to go digging through your desk to find the one crumpled up brochure to pull out, it's going to feel very different than right. If you talk about it a lot and it's just, hey, just putting it out there. You don't have to tell me about it. It's just there for you.
And normalize it.
Yes. Yeah. Don't make it a special event.
Right.
All right. So vicarious trauma. A lot of us know what this looks like. I know this is a repeat. If anybody in this webinar has not read Laura Vandernoot's book or heard Laura Vandernoot speak, highly recommend.
Right.
She is the guru around this.
Right. So this is just information. You can read it. If you don't get the handouts, I'll give it to you. We're not going to walk through this whole thing. So tips to encourage longevity.
And we are looking for your tips as well. So as we go through these, if you're having a bright idea, like what works for you around creating longevity, please share it with the group. This next one, again, we're going to spend a minute on this because I think this one is a big challenge, especially if you work in a small program and the only way anybody is going to move up is whether somebody quit or dies, right? It's hopeless if you work, right? And if anybody has aspirations of being the director and you're the director and you have no intention of going anywhere, it's hard to keep somebody hopeful.
And they're giving you the side eye.
Right.
Right.
Like, so, how's that cough?
Right. Aren't you retiring soon?
I know. Yeah.
So just thinking about it's an opportunity, and challenging work, increasing skill set can help set the stage for the next level. So, it's important to separate out other positive opportunities and challenges that keep staff engaged and feeling valued. I guess for me, what I like to think about is if people are just doing their day-to-day work, I actually really try to connect with people to see, am I getting the best out of this person? Are they getting the best out of this job? Am I challenging them? Are they being challenged? Do they have skills that we're not tapping into? How do I pull those skills out of that person? So I'm kind of thinking of ways to keep this person engaged and interested in their job, so that I'm also finding ways to figure out, like, what do they like? What do they like to do? What kind of skills do they have that we haven't even talked about that, that we could use in this job? So just honing in on what people have to offer that doesn't always look like advocacy, right? It could be public speaking. It could be they're great at proofreading grants, right? Or they could contribute to a grant, or whatever the thing might be. But checking in with folks and see if they're interested in some of that, being engaging in the community.
Well, exactly. And we have a great comment here from Susie, who is talking about she'd love to be able to give folks opportunities, but wants to be very mindful about not just piling on, right? So sure, I'd love to learn to write a grant, would love to help whoever's writing that grant, but how am I supposed to do that on top of my regular job demand, right? That's hard to do. So again, it's negotiating with that person. If somebody reaches out to you and clearly states that they want more challenges, they want to do something a little different, you have to work with them on what that would look like. And again, that often can lead to working with the team. Sometime having a small team meeting with people that actually do the same work, like whether it's shelter staff or community program staff or emergency response teams, whatever that is. Sometimes it's good to just mix it all up. Let's make a list of all the things this group of 3 absolutely has to do. And then they kind of just renegotiate who does what, right? Things can micro team leaders, things can kind of shift and move, and it can be creative. And maybe somebody that was just doing one support group a week ends up doing 2 or 3, and that actually works out great for their schedule, right? And the person giving up a support group, that frees them up to do something else, whether it's help the volunteer coordinator. But it's just being really creative and kind of busting out of those really stringent job descriptions. This would mean redoing some job descriptions, but also shaking things up so people feel like they're doing something a little different. And again, this micro team leaders thing, again, this is looking at your management structure and figuring out what a team lead could look like.
Right.
And team leads there's not money involved, they're not doing direct supervisory work, but they are coordinating workload things. And they're reporting up to the actual supervisor. So that is a really clear way to recognize someone that is leadership material.
Right. And I think you bring up a good point. And to add to, if you're going to promote someone to a team lead, it really means that you've got to talk to them about responsibility and what that looks like, because they're taking on a new role.
Right.
So that conversation actually really has to happen.
Well, I had a team lead once, and it was an absolute nightmare. She just got super bossy. She thought she was the boss, and everybody, it was like revolt. Right. It just didn't work out. This person's personality was really not good. It wasn't a good fit. And I realized that it was a little too late. It didn't appear to me that would be the situation, but it was. So you have to be able to reel that back in.
Right. And I just said to someone yesterday or day before yesterday email that, it's great to try things, and it's not written in stone. No one carved it in. So you can go back and reassess the changes that you made and say, this didn't really work that well. Yeah. Let's tweak it this way. So I give kudos for people who take a leap and try new things, and then tweak them as you go.
Exactly. And I think 3 and 6 months are great periods of time to try things. And you tell folks that up front, right? Let's see how this goes. Let's take a look at this in 3 months. A few weeks isn't enough time. Things can go haywire, right? Give it a chance to kind of smooth out. 3 months, 6 months, typically enough. And then you really do assess whether this new idea is going to work or not.
Yeah. All right. So competitive wages and benefits.
I feel like we're kind of harping on the same thing here, but I think it's hugely important.
Yeah.
Because it's mostly women. We have a lot of men, granted, and a lot of these men are parents as well, and a lot of these men are also helping taking care of their own folks. But largely, it's women who are working in our programs. And
I think your last bullet point here really says a lot. Most staff will bend over backwards for an employee they know will understand if they need to take time off for a personal reason.
Yeah.
And that right there, I think, sums up everything.
I know I did.
Yeah.
Right, didn't you?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, we both had little kids while we were working at New Beginnings, and it just meant the world.
Right.
And I knew that if I ever became a supervisor, that's exactly how I would be.
Right.
And it was. Like, it meant a lot to me to really take into consideration why people needed a flexible work schedule.
Correct. Yeah.
Any thoughts or ideas, questions about this piece? Type it on in.
All right.
All right.
So we talked a little bit about this before. I said we would bring it up, but effective training and supervision. I mean, I can't stress how important it is to properly train folks. Do not slack off in this area. Don't think it's not important. Don't assume that the person that you hired came with lots of experience. Every job is different. It doesn't matter if you worked in a DV program prior to coming to this DV program. Things are just run a little different. And so making sure that you're training folks, informing them. If you don't have, create a checklist. I mean, like, I can't remember everything. Honestly, I cannot remember everything. So I have to write it all down. And that can actually seem overwhelming to folks if you hand them this huge 2-page list of, these are all the things we do. But you don't have to go over everything at once. You can slowly sort of feed it to them. And then talk with them about all things that are happening within your program, you know, what days you meet for all staff meeting, what's expected of them. Really training folks and giving them the most information that they can have, I tell you, will go a long way. Create a written protocol. I kind of said that a little bit, but you know, that really helps for people to have that thing in their hand that says this is how things work out. Now, it does not help if you give them a protocol that was created 20 years ago. If it has not been updated, this is not a good handout, correct? So it should also involve some shadowing, because you want to pair up folks. People should see how other people are doing the work. They should be connecting with the other advocates, other folks on their staff. And I believe that there should be some cross training. Like, I want to know what the children's advocate is doing. I want to know what the legal advocate is doing. I want to know how my position is going to support that position or connect with these other positions within the agency. There's always going to be an evaluation. I think that is important. We all know how evaluations are important. If you haven't updated them, please do so. And question, here's a question for you. How do you balance workload when staff is taxed with training a new employee? So June and I were kind of talking about this, and we were thinking, like, it's really hard when you're training a new employee and there's been this gap and some of your staff have picked up the slack. Like, how do you prepare for that? How do you balance that workload out? Some people, you know, I know that I had to partial it out to other people, and that became hard for folks, because not only did they have a caseload of 50, but it went up to even more than that when they had these huge caseloads. So what does that look like for folks? What do you do when there's someone leaves and there's this gap and someone has to fill in?
Well, I think, you know, there's the obvious, oh crap moment when somebody is left, but, you know, hopefully they've given him enough notice so that you've got a team meeting or two in there to plan about what to do in the gap time before there's a new hire, which could be, you know, a 2-month period of time. So people know how to parcel out that extra load for the next couple months. You know, the key here is that you keep stressing how temporary that is. And the other key is that they get little perks and rewards along the way. Hey, you guys, I noticed you've been pulling a lot of hours, you've been doing, you know, and you give them little perks, right? Whatever that perk can be, whether it's candy or a Starbucks card or whatever, just some little token of appreciation that they're doing extra. And then when that new staff actually is hired, in the meeting you have with your current staff before they start, you have that kind of all-in conversation. Hey, we are so excited. Deidre's going to start on the 15th. Let's just work out a training schedule here together. You know, this is what needs to be done. You've prepared a list of things and how much time needs to be spent on each piece. You know, let's figure out who can do what. So it's a team effort from the beginning before that person even arrives, right? You know when their start date is going to be, and you figure out who on the team is going to help train on what pieces. So I need you to get ready here. We want you to type in now. The evaluation component piece of this, we've had some comments back. This means the evaluation component during the training cycle, right? We're asking that new employee how it's going. Are they getting what they need? How do you do that? One, do you do that? And how do you do that? What does that look like? And we're looking for feedback on this. So if you could please type that in. We're going to share some of those comments.
There's one comment.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
okay. So please, you guys type in, do you do an evaluation component during onboarding of new staff rather? And what does that look like? So, and I think this also, this is you as a supervisor knowing that what you're training them on, the new staff on, is actually working. You're not just blowing into the air. We're getting that a lot of folks don't do this. So this is just a great idea to think about incorporating. It's a verbal, yeah, check in on understanding along the way, but not written. Okay.
And when we say not written, I mean, I think someone said not written, but you don't have to do a full evaluation, but if you have some sort of shorter form that you can use, I think that's actually great.
Yeah, but I mean, the goal here is check in during the onboarding process.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
Someone said, this is a great idea. Thank you, lots. Verbal, not written. We don't do a formal evaluation, but are small enough that we could check in along the way. Yeah, and it doesn't have to even be written. You could just be, a conversation.
And if you're a DV program within a larger program, there's a lot of onboarding that goes on. And I'll use the YWCA as an example. I mean, you're just one program within a very large agency. So there are a lot of agency protocols and policies that need to, be gone through, and then there's your own little ones for whatever group you're working with. But there was a literal checklist, right? So if you create a checklist, that can be really helpful if you're from a larger agency, or there are a lot of pieces to that you want to cover. And then both you and the new staff have that checklist and are keeping track along the way of what still needs to be done and what still needs to be covered. Okay, I'm going to read a couple of these comments. Small enough to check in along the way. I do it for my volunteers, written and in person, not just for staff. Oh, okay. Is this question in regard to staff who have already been on board? No, this is for new staff. New staff. Or you're asking if we check in with new employees throughout the news. Yes. Correct. Yes, Charlotte, yes. This is for new staff that you've hired that you're training to be as a part of your staff. Yes.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, I remember when I would hire folks, I would actually start the hiring process and I would look at my calendar and I just blocked off full days. Like, I'm not doing anything these 5 days other than just focusing on this person, because that takes up so much of your time.
Yes.
It's hard to juggle both. And you actually don't want to be in someone's face all day. So you'll have time to maybe check your emails and check your phone calls, because everyone needs a break. But I tell you, you really have to block out your calendar to devote the time to training folks.
And I don't know if this is in our slides. I can't remember, but it should be if it's not. But day one, the very first day, somebody needs to take that new staff to lunch, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's you, but it's probably better if it's one of their peers takes them to lunch, because then they can just sit down and just like, okay, let's break it down for a minute. What's this really like? What's that really like? But you have somebody assigned, or two somebodies assigned, to take that new person to lunch.
Mm-hmm.
It means a lot. It sounds small or maybe sound impossible, but try to make that happen on the first day. Not, oh, well, we forgot, we're going to take them out on the third day. Because I think one of the stressful things is, oh my gosh, do I bring my lunch, right? But what you tell that person when you're on that phone call with them, we are so excited for you to start on the 15th. And oh, by the way, don't worry about bringing your lunch. We want to take you out to lunch, right? So they just have that already on their calendar, and you've got one or two people from your team that is going to take them out to lunch. It means a lot, and it just breaks that first stressful day down for everybody.
Right. All right. So I thought this was just a cute slide that says, what if we don't change at all and something magical just happens? I totally have been here before where I feel like, oh my God, the changes, like, can it just miraculously happen that things just fall into place and everyone's happy and everything's flowing and working so well? And we know that doesn't happen, right? So,
I love magical thinking. Magical thinking gets me through a lot of stressful situations. But, when you are the supervisor or you're the manager and you're in charge of this group, your magical thinking sometimes has to be kept to yourself.
Exactly. And really it's not going to happen magically. You've got to put the work in, you've got to put the time in. And honestly, I think when you do put the work in, you put the time in, things are going to happen.
Yes.
Things are going to change. There's going to be a shift, and you'll see that shift. It's just about, carving out what you want to do and making the time for it. And you can't do everything. You can't go over all your evaluations and change your evaluations at the same time you're training 3 people, and at the same time you're trying to bring on a new project. So you can't do everything at once, but just focus on one thing, and that one thing will come out and you'll do it well. So I think we kind of skimmed over this, avoiding conflict. So we all know when you avoid conflict, it doesn't end well, right? It just kind of lingers. It just goes bad. So we just want to touch base on this a little bit, because we all know that it happens in a lot of our programs. Things happen, conflicts happen, gossip, things that people hear, things that are happening in the office. And I think we talked a little earlier about, hire slow, fire quickly. When things are going really bad, the longer you ignore it, the worse it gets. So really thinking about, if there's something that's happening in the office, addressing it, talking about it, getting to the bottom of it, holding people accountable, it really can just nip things in the bud.
Right, and if you have a toxic work environment, this is not a surprise. Everybody knows it, everybody feels it, you feel it, because they're complaining to you individually, and you are also witnessing some communication styles that are not great.
Right.
I'll use the word not great,
right.
But especially if you have one toxic person on the team, that can spread, and it's amazing how much damage one toxic person can do. I mean, the chaos that one person can create has a long-lasting, really negative effect. That's why, doing something about it as quickly as you can is going to mitigate any long-term damage.
Right.
And we've done a lot of TA, technical assistance, for programs that were challenged, and to work through this issue. It can be done. It's just hard. But I think, we all just need to recognize that there are some work groups that are extremely toxic or extremely high conflict, and that is a hard place to work in. That's where you're going to get the feedback that, people hate coming to work.
Right.
It's
and
stressful.
I think some of these bullet points are so important, because if you build a culture of respect, that's what people just walk into, and that's what they know. Have a zero tolerance for gossip. We all know that gossip's going to happen, but I think one time June and I were talking to folks, and we were like, well, hold each other accountable. If someone's coming to you and they're gossiping, then someone should say, is this something we should be talking about?
Well, I think, and the language we said was, didn't we agree that we are not going to gossip?
Right.
Or this feels like gossip to me, and I think we have a group agreement that we're not going to do that.
Right.
And it's really hard to be the first one to say it,
right.
Because honestly, if you've got something juicy to say, come sit next to me. Right? It's hard. It's hard.
Right.
But gossip can really drive a wedge into a team.
Exactly.
And it can get, and I know, and I have witnessed this across the state. It's the smaller programs where folks are really super connected throughout the community that this can do the most damage.
Yeah, it's really challenging.
It's really hard, and it makes it hard for that person, perhaps that staff person, to find a job within that community as well, because the jobs are not plentiful.
Right.
Whereas in Seattle, so much of the DV advocates are shuffling between agencies because there are, maybe 30 different agencies they can work at.
And you can always do that little group activity where you sit in a circle and someone says one word into another person's ear, and it totally changes.
Telephone. It's the game of telephone.
Yeah, and it changes when it gets around the room. Use that as an example. I mean, it's a fun game, but it makes a point, right? That, gossip just doesn't work well. And we touched on this a little bit ago about for new leaders, and you were talking about if you're going to, set someone up to say, hey, you're going to be the lead now. You have to train them. And have conversation so that they're able to give hard feedback. And I think if we're going to promote people, if we're going to get people new positions that require them to have difficult conversations, we've got to teach folks how to do that. We can't assume that everyone knows how to have challenging conversations. People are really just uncomfortable with that. And even if they're not in a position of a lead or a leadership position, and they're just struggling with having a challenging conversation, that might be something that you talk about. I think a lot of people avoid conflict, even peer to peer.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so,
I mean,
yeah,
sometimes I am not the one, right? There are some days you just want it to be smooth, right? And it's
totally.
not. But
Yeah.
when you're the boss, you have got to just deal. That's what you get paid the medium bucks for. We have a great question here. Back to the build a
Get
culture.
the medium bucks.
Build a culture of respect. That's one of our bullet points here. What does that actually look like? How do you actually do that, right? So let's talk about that for a second. And the way you can do that is literally call it what it is. And it could be a 360, maybe hopefully it's a 180, but it could be a 360 from how your group is operating right now. But you have your regularly scheduled team meetings that you're already having, right? We're going to assume that's happening. And you say, we are turning the corner here. We are going to build a culture of respect, and this is what this looks like. And what we can start with is zero tolerance for gossip.
Right.
This is a no gossip zone. And you have the word gossip with the red circle with the slash through it, right? No gossip zone. And somebody is going to think, well, how the heck do we do that? And that's that whole thing. You have to hold each other accountable and let each other figure out how to do that. But you give them the language on how to do that. And that language is, oh, hey, wait a minute. This sounds like gossip. I thought we agreed we weren't going to do that.
And you can say, this is making me uncomfortable, because if someone's coming to you with gossip, they're probably gossiping about you as well. So just being straightforward to say, this is making me uncomfortable and I don't like it. And if you respect what I'm saying, you're not going to continue with this conversation. If you respect the other people in this agency, in this program, you're not going to continue doing what you're doing. So holding people responsible and making sure that they respect their colleagues, their coworkers. And I mean, I honestly believe when it's toxic, it trickles down to the people that we're serving in our community. Absolutely. Because it doesn't stop in one place, right? So it's really important that people not only respect themselves, respect their coworkers, and respect the people that they're serving in the community. And once they can do that, the gossip goes down, and then hold people accountable. If they're coming to you and they're gossiping and you feel uncomfortable about it, just be very clear. This makes me feel uncomfortable.
Right, and giving that staff person permission to walk away from the conversation, that's also part of the new norm, right? And because if you've got somebody that's really, really good at gossip, or gossips a lot, or knows how to kind of backdoor that gossip with things like, okay, hold on, this really has to do with work, because I just heard this I just saw this down at Target. And let me tell you that, and they will somehow try to connect it back to something that is agency work related. And it's really not. It's just a backdoor way to slip in some nasty gossip. So again, making sure your staff has the language on how to get out of that conversation, and also just say, actually, you know what, this still feels like gossip. I'm walking away from this conversation. Right. And it's respectful, and they understand, and none of this is a surprise. And for the final bullet point here, another way to literally do this accountability is, today we're going to talk about how to have difficult conversations and give hard feedback, right? You train your staff on how to have that conversation, because it's hard. I mean, think about your worst relationship, right? Your worst personal relationship, right? And how you have those difficult conversations. And your worst personal relationship, it could possibly be your best personal relationship, and it could be your partner, the one you are most comfortable talking to and giving negative feedback to. Right? Think about that for a hot second, right? The person you are most comfortable with is the person you are most comfortable giving negative feedback to. And how you give that feedback in a respectful, loving way is going to have a way different result than if you are just griping or nagging, right? So there are ways to do this, but it takes time, and it takes conversations, and could be hard conversations for you, right? I don't know many people that embrace conflict, right? It's hard.
Well,
really
that's
hard.
Kind of our next question.
Yes. So hang on, we have a couple of comments here. I just don't want to fly by here.
I'm going to go to the slide so you can be thinking about this.
Figuring out how to build respect across a multicultural staff that follows policy and where everyone feels respected is a delicate balance. Or they are using the word debriefing, which pigeonholes their coworkers into listening because they feel like bad coworkers because they are not being supportive to one another. Yes. Oh, Joy Kraus.
Say that again, because we do have interpreters and you were going really fast.
Okay, sorry, interpreters. I guess I'm going to paraphrase. And this is, we were talking about backdoor gossiping. And one way that some manipulative coworkers can do this is use the word debriefing. Hi, I need to debrief this with you, right? Debriefing is you've had a difficult conversation with a client or a housing situation, and it's absolutely professional. It is about something that's going on in the workplace that really does affect clients, people we serve. This is not about what you overheard at Target, right? It's completely different. So even if somebody does start to, in quotes, debrief, um, once you recognize it to not actually be that, that's when you can, start your, wait a minute, this sounds like gossip to me. And the other one that used to drive me absolutely nuts was self-care. And I'm not knocking self-care. I think we need self-care. But a lot of people shroud really crappy behavior around self-care, right?
Right. And I think the other thing is that sometimes, and I'm guilty of this too, is something will happen and you're in the moment and you don't know how to respond, right? And you just kind of listen. And listening also means you're participating. However, if you walk away and you realize you listened and you didn't do anything or you didn't say anything, you can always go back and say, I just want to be clear with you that that conversation was a little challenging for me. I don't want to be a part of it. And you can give them some feedback to say, hey, like maybe this is, you can talk to that person instead of talking to me. So never feel like if you didn't deal with it at the moment, you can always go back and have that conversation with someone later, because sometimes we're caught off guard.
Oh, yeah. And you can say, and this is another trick, like if you all of a sudden feel like you're speechless, because sometimes, I've heard a couple things that do render me speechless, but you can just, say, hang on, this is a lot. I just need to hit pause on this and think about it for a minute, and then let's talk later, right? And later can be the end of the day, but you can literally stop that conversation and say, hang on, this is a lot for me to listen to right now. I just need to stop right now.
And I think that goes so well with just being a supervisor or a manager. Like when sometimes when things happen, your best response is not in the moment. It's after you've had some time to think it through, or even actually connect with another colleague to really know how to respond. So sometimes you might just say, I just saw what happened. Can I get back with you later? Because thinking about your response is actually going to be the best for you, rather than responding very, very quickly out of, what is this? They say responding out of urgency or whatever. I do want to point out we have about 30 minutes left. So June and I are going to get through these slides. We got a couple more questions for you. So
why do people avoid? I think we've actually talked about this a lot.
If you want to throw anything in the box, please feel free to, and we'll respond to that.
I love this comic. A mediator hasn't worked, so I brought in everyone's moms.
I mean, it's like if I bring in everyone's moms, maybe that'll change people's behaviors, because people respect
it totally would
their mothers, right?
It's really fun. My daughter, a lot of you know my daughter Chelsea. She is 29 now, and she works in HR, and she works out of Chicago, and she covers the whole Midwest, so she's flying around, and she has big problems in big cities, and all HR related. But it's really funny. So she shares some of these situations with me, and my automatic response always is, do I need to fly over? Do I need to fly over? So I'm like, I think they need me. I think they need your mom, right? She's fully capable and doing a fantastic job, but it's that whole mom thing, right? Because I think moms fix everything.
Moms fix everything. They do.
Yep. So let's talk about an enjoyable work environment. And please type in here things that you do at your agency to make your agency a fun/pleasant place to work, right? What do you do? Why is your work environment enjoyable?
And take note, if you have nothing to say, that is something to think about.
That should be on a t-shirt. If you have nothing to say, that is something to think about. That's good, Dee.
That's funny.
Well, so first things first, find out how each staff person prefers to be acknowledged and praised. And this matters. And look, at the next thing I say here is publicly acknowledged, because it contradicts, but this is important. If you've got somebody that would rather melt into the walls as opposed to getting, highlighted at an all staff meeting with 60 people, you need to know that. Right. And you're going to know this because you're meeting with your staff regularly. Right.
You're not trying to embarrass them. You don't want to put them on the spot.
No.
Some people like it. Some people don't like it at all.
Yeah.
But being aware of what people are comfortable with is really important. People, again, I mentioned this earlier, people want feedback. People want to know they're doing their work well. And they don't want you to say things like, oh, you're doing a great job. because that doesn't really mean anything. And I always learned from Judy Chen, who's just awesome. She would say to me things like, hey, I want to point out to you what you did really well today. And she really remembered specific things that she thought that I said or did that was helpful to me, that gave me feedback. And so it also made me aware that she was actually paying attention.
Right.
She didn't gloss it over.
Right.
She didn't say, good job, kudos, high five. She actually said things that were helpful to me.
Right. So be really specific. Know who would like to be privately acknowledged by you when you're one-on-one versus somebody who wants you to come in with a cake with sparklers and blowing horns, right? You've got super public people that they want to be recognized as public as possible, banners on the wall, and then you've got people that are the exact opposite. You need to know how each person prefers to be acknowledged. And this is a great question to ask when you're one-on-one with your teams. How do you like to be acknowledged and praised? Right? That means you care. And for those that are comfortable with it, right, staff meeting, but do it. Acknowledge them. And we have an idea, a recognition event for staff and volunteers, and monitor who is getting kudos so as not to appear biased or playing favorites. Now, if you've got somebody that's consistently underperforming, that is a whole separate issue that you need to address. But if you've got a great team that's performing well, just keep, be heads up about how you're giving kudos and to who, and keep it, as fair as possible.
And if people are struggling on how to just do something different, maybe they just want to lead a staff meeting.
Yep.
Give them that opportunity to lead a staff meeting. Take notes, whatever it might be. But you can do that as well.
Food. I mean, come on, we work in DV and sexual assault. We all know how important this is. Nice food, special food. I think we called it fun food. Yeah. So figure out what fun food is for your group, and sometimes for no occasion, right? Just bring it in, whether it's bagels and cream cheese or Hershey's Kisses. One idea I know that was really popular that we did at the YWCA is the leadership team provided Valentine's Day breakfast to everybody. We made heart-shaped pancakes, and I realize that's a big deal and an expense, but it was something that the leadership team did for the line staff that was really meaningful to them. And we all wore pink and red aprons, and we made heart-shaped pancakes, and we served them. Mm-hmm. And they had really nice, centerpieces of red and pink M&Ms, just all that fun stuff. So Valentine's Day is a really nice day, and it's coming up to do something as low-key or as big as you want.
And what we did is we invited several participants for Valentine's Day, and we put a table out, and all the staff participated in creating this wonderful environment for several of the participants. And we just gave them a great dinner and gave them flowers, and it made all the staff feel really excited about being a part of this process. So it might not be you doing something for them. It could be them doing something for others that make them feel really good about their work.
Yeah. Now, I personally love Valentine's Day, but I completely recognize it can suck for a lot of people, and it's a super commercial, Hallmark created event. But I like the pink and the red, and I like the love aspect of it all. So it doesn't have to be about a romance. This can just about spreading love and joy, right? Like, you can have a really nice time on Valentine's Day, which I believe is a work day this year. Let me check. You can it's on a Wednesday, for heaven's sakes. I mean, you can do something really sweet and small, and it doesn't have to be a big deal, Yeah.
And I think one of the things we put in here is recognize survivors' accomplishments, because oftentimes we don't know what great things have happened. Sometimes our advocates aren't sharing with each other the accomplishments that they supported with their clients. So sometimes just knowing what the advocates are doing and some of their accomplishments with their participants is great information to have.
Exactly. Okay. And then recognizing that different staff have different ideas of what is rewarding and enjoyable. So again, finding out what those things are. And really quickly, before we move on to the generational stuff, I just want to read a couple of comments that we got. Laughing with coworkers. That's really a great idea. And it should be happening, right? And humor. We all have great humor and access it regularly. That's great. And it's true. I mean, if you cannot laugh doing this work, oh my goodness. Okay. So we had a lot of requests to talk about this. I tell you, there's so much information on the internet about this. And this is one
of the slides. We have two slides that are kind of similar, but we just like both of them, so we thought we'd just put them both in there.
Right.
But Nan did a training not that long ago around with leaders, and we kind of covered some of this information because it really pointed out the difference between, you know, the seniors who have been in this work for a really long time and the Genzers, or whatever they're calling them. And obviously this only goes to 2009, so there's a whole nother category that isn't even here. But to just really recognize where you are in this movement and where folks around you are, and what they like, what they don't like, how they expect work to be done, what is their learning style, how do they communicate, how do they problem solve. I mean, like, all this stuff is so different from group to group to group. And recognizing some of this information, I remember one time someone said to me, God, if I could just keep those folks off their phones at work. And I was like, well, you know, it's a whole different generation. Their phone is like our computers. You're like it's just how they get their information very, very quickly from their phones. It doesn't necessarily mean they're talking to someone. It just could mean that they're looking up information. So recognizing how folks, you know, get their information or do their work can look different across the board depending on, you know, where we sort of fit into this this generational differences.
And I think one to pay attention to here is job changing, the very bottom one, because we are talking about staff retention, right? So older folks, right, they tend to get a lot of value and feel like they earn extra gold stars if they've been at a company for a long time. Think of your parents, right? Typically, there was a lot of, I don't know, credit given if somebody stayed at a company for 10, 20, 30 years and, you know, got the watch or whatever, you know, like, whereas you can see as we move along the decades here, it becomes less and less important. So that's why, you know, when we hire folks on, there's not an expectation that they're going to stay for 10, 20 years. They're not, right? The young folks now are using these jobs as stepping stones to their next thing. There is always a next thing. Oh, I know. I looked at this and felt old too, because I think the years are broken up a little funky on this one, but it just kind of, just think older, younger. And I think this one I like a lot because especially around communication, learning style.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Right now, the 20 somethings, the 30 somethings that are working in our programs, you know, they are getting information in seconds off their phone, right? Resources. It is different than the big notebook that used to sit at the crisis line. Remember that gigantic notebook and things are in page protectors and you're flipping through the tabs? No longer. It is online and it is accessed in seconds.
Right. And just, I mean, look at some of this problem solving, decision making, seek approval, all the way over to team decided. Like, it's the way that things are moving forward looks really different with our age groups of folks. So it's really important to sort of look at this and see where you fit in, and then look at the folks that you're working with in your training. And here was another slide that kind of covers some of that. And I don't know, I just love this information. And I know Nan covered it in the training that she did, but I went and I looked this stuff up because I just thought it was just golden information for us to have. And I mean, I hope it's helpful to you, but you can also go online, find some of this information for yourself. And I love that the training piece at the bottom says, I learned it the hard way, you can too. Okay, that's probably me. But all the way over to the millennials is, continuous learning is a way of life. And, you know, that actually scares me. Continuous learning is a way of life. If I have to keep on learning till I'm 95, I don't know what's going to happen.
That's what's going to keep your brain going, though. Let's look at,
I don't know. That's a little scary.
Let's look at, I mean, that learning could be like, you know, figuring out who's getting married and who's having kids.
True.
Okay. So feedback real quick, right? The older generation, no news is good news, all the way up to, right, comes at the push of a button, or people that need constant feedback, constant feedback. I know that young people in their 20s, and well, particularly in their 20s, it was all that group work when they were in elementary school and middle school. They're used to working in a group, right? And that is fraught with its own issues of somebody always ends up doing more work than the other. You've got the one person that does nothing and gets all the credit. But group work is that mentality of 20-somethings, as opposed to when we came up, I'm talking about us, where, you know, we were doing our own work and there wasn't a ton of feedback except the report card you got a couple times a year from school, right? Or your first jobs where you got a once a year annual review, right? So now it's that constant level of feedback, and that is what we're trying to gear folks to, is
people want that feedback.
yes.
They want that connection. They want that soft touch, not necessarily actually touching someone, but that hey, can I check in? How are you doing? How's it going? Now there's a big difference between that and micromanaging. Do not get them confused. So we're just talking about a check-in. We're not talking about like you're not doing this and you're not doing that. It's really about a soft touch conversation.
Okay. So, yeah, these slides will all be available to you.
I will make sure I send them to you.
So the next two are what older generations want and what younger generations want. We really liked this. We took this right out of a book you're going to see the reference to that. We want you to just read this because it is too much for us to go through, but we want to highlight these bullet points. So this is what younger generations want, right? Information and advice based on the experience that will help leaders become effective in building future social change. Acknowledge younger generations' leadership, ideas, and vision, and share power and recognize that newer generations will be leading social change in the future. So that is what younger generations want. What older leaders want from new generations, from next generations, I'm sorry. All right, so take a second to read that. And what older leaders would like is acknowledge their work and contributions, support their relevancy now, not just in the past, and recognize the legacy they are leaving. And again, this is from the book, Working Across Generations, and we've got a picture of it actually next. Any comments about these?
Hey, and I was just checking with Becca, our person who kind of helps us with our webinar, and she said over to your right-hand side where you probably have some directions over there and information, it says there's a PowerPoint attached, and you can click on that and download that for yourself. If you have any problems with that, let me know. I can still forward it to you. So it should be attached to this webinar, and you can download it for yourself.
So any questions about this? There was a lot of interest around the younger generation, older generation stuff. I just want to pause. We're in the final 15 minutes of the webinar. We've got time for questions, and we do want to talk about this for a minute because there was a lot of interest in this. So I'm assuming that you are working hard to have a pretty good representation of different generations on your staff. If you do, how's that working? If you don't, what are your thoughts about that? We can get some chat feedback going, that would be great. So we can report out. Yeah, so if you have cross generations working on your teams, how's that working for you or not? And if you don't, curious, why and your thoughts about that. So if we can take just a few seconds and do some chat feedback about that, the generation, or any question around the generational stuff we talked about. And I think, when I do stuff like this, and Dee and I have been talking about this for a long time. I mean, anybody with kids, we know this stuff, right? Because we are dealing with the younger generation. We've got kids, we've got the technology stuff that we're coming along. Like I always joke that one of the constant things my daughter says to me is, "Can you not?" And I found this actual shirt that said, "Can you not?" And I was too cheap to buy it, so I took a picture of it and sent it to her. And I will use the example of Snapchat. I'm an absolute nightmare on Snapchat. And her friends have shown it to me. She's shown it to I'm just not made for Snapchat, right? And so they've told me to stick to Facebook. Facebook is for your mom and your auntie. That's what I've learned. The younger folks are not doing Facebook. They're doing Instagram and Snapchat. So she told me to stick to Facebook. That was my zone. Stay in the pocket.
Yeah.
Stay in the pocket, stay in Facebook. Okay, so we've got some great feedback here. Within our agency, we have multiple generations represented, older, younger, in leadership roles as well. That's great. Trying to learn to navigate these differences. Mm-hmm. Older generation are veteran advocates in our agency. They're mentoring the new advocates.
That's awesome.
That's really good. The younger staff are mentoring us on Instagram, social media, etc. Good, that's great. Many of our executive leadership are boomers and Gen Xers. They definitely need their relevancy now, not just their efforts they have put into the past. Yes. That's a great idea. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's hard because we've got a lot of older women, particularly working in the field, and We need to recognize that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think because that whole story about it's hard to teach a old dog a new trick, and I'm telling you, I'm the old dog. But
And Snapchat is the new trick.
right,
Yeah.
right. And I got to make space, room, and time to learn new things.
Yeah.
I have to do it, otherwise I'm out of touch. So it's also about carving out that time to learn something new, and sometimes that's connecting with other staff members, even about tweeting. Like I'm like, what tweeting tweets? I'm so lost. I'm not connected, and so I actually just have to spend the time to learn how to do some of these things. And the coalition actually tweets, and I need to be connected. So I got to carve out the time to make that important.
Exactly.
So
great comments. You can keep them coming. Thank you. Those are great.
So here are the slides of the books that we've got some of our information from. The Working Across Generations is a great book. It talks about, working with diverse groups of folks, generations, and what that's like. Good information in it. That's the book that Nan used during her training. Managing to Change the World. It's a manager's guide to getting results, and Supervision Matters. I love Supervision Matters. That is an awesome book. There's lots of tips in that book. If you're going to get any of these books, I personally like Supervision Matters. But Working Across Generations is also great. They're all three great.
They're really good, but we got a lot of our information off the Working Across Generations book on the left. But these are great books. All of them are really good. But for this in particular, we got great info off that. But guess what? You could win one of these books. You could win Working Across Generations.
Yes.
So the contest is the first two people to type in a date closest to Nan's birthday. Nan Stoops, our executive director, without passing it, will win a copy of the book.
The first two people.
So go. When is Nan's birthday? Just a date, a month and a day, a month and a day. Month and a day.
She seems the closest. That's 5.
Without going over. Oh, without going over. Kira says Nan is a deity. She has always existed. Good one. Good one,
That
Kira.
is so funny.
Anybody else?
Well, you guys are hilarious.
Month and a day. Month and a day. When? What is Nan Stoops' birthday?
So far.
Okay.
Oh, she put it in twice.
One entry. Joy. Come on. One entry. Oh, actually, it's the same date.
Oh, okay.
Okay. You don't need to put a year. Anybody else? Come on, nobody even has the month right. There's a clue. There's a clue.
We just need one more.
One more. Come on, y'all.
Are you guys Snapchatting?
I know, no, they're playing
Nan.
Candy Crush. Candy Crush. What is Nan Stoops' birthday?
So obviously.
Okay, we have one, but we're looking for a second. Is it going to be?
It would be. Oh, she's the closest. That's it.
Really, you guys don't want to win a copy of this book?
Oh, here. Yeah.
There we go. Can we have another guess? Yeah, have another guess.
There we go.
Right here. Oh, here we go. Okay, we're going to give it 10 more seconds. Just to make sure that's right. Oh, wait.
Okay. They have been first.
Oh, we haven't said it first. Okay, we have winner. We have two winners. We have two books. Joy Krause and Charlotte Jarvis win. Nan Stoops' birthday is
May 25th. Yay! Yay! You guys did so well.
So Deidre is going to send Joy and Charlotte a copy of this great book. Perfect.
And so what our last question is,
Kira, yes, yours was definitely the most original and, might I say, enjoyable.
And I think you already have the book, so. So do we miss any questions? Do you guys have any questions for us? We have about 5 more minutes. You know, just lay it on us if you have any thoughts or things that you want to share with us, and anything that we might have missed. You'll also have time to fill that out in the evaluation. While you're thinking of your questions, I'm going to quickly just let you know that there's a couple of things happening with the coalition. We have a webinar that's coming up March 7th, a lunch like this, and that's Eileen. You can always go to our website, check all this information out. People of Color and Native People Gathering, that's February 8th, that's coming up. So if you have folks on your staff that you want to come to this that identify as a person of color, please sign them up, have them come to this. It's actually a gathering, so it's just great conversation about how to continue to work in this movement, how to stay rejuvenated. So please send folks to that. It's going to be in Seattle.
And I just want to say, if you think this is good as a webinar, come see us live, because Deidre and I are hosting this People of Color and Native People Gathering. So you can come hang out with us at New Beginnings. We're going to have great food, a lot of fun, and also have some good conversation and connection with folks.
And I do other trainings that June will be with. So if you missed that, don't worry about them. And then there is Advocacy and Activism. This one's going to be in Spokane, February 12th. And then the other one is going to be in Seattle, February 15th. And Kara Asari is going to be speaking there. So if you want to know more about it, please go to our website. But those are some of the trainings that are coming up. So check that out. I just wanted to give you a highlight of what the coalition will be doing in the next few weeks to come. And so let's look at some of your questions real quick before we get off this webinar. Let's see. Great. I can't see. What are ways we could energize them? What are ways?
Hang on. For staff that are more or less burnt out, does anyone feel it's possible to revive them? I think yes. And one of the ways to do that I thought worked really well is to sit with them with a calendar and plan when their next vacation is.
That's one,
right?
Yes.
Like a solid week off, right? Just work with them on, because they need to step away.
Right.
They need to step away, and they need to breathe deeply, and they need to forget they have a job for a while.
And I think the other piece is to working with people to find out what challenges them most about their job. What parts of it feel like it's really draining for them, that they're not connected to. And that might take them a minute to really figure out the answer to that. So you might not get an answer right away. It might take them time to go back and really think that through. But there's probably something about their position or their job or what they're doing on a day-to-day basis that they're uncomfortable with, or it's not working, and they just need some support around, but they can't quite figure it out. So just figuring out what's challenging them on a day-to-day basis that makes them feel this funny way about their position. It might not be that they're unhappy or they don't like it. It's just that there's a disconnect somehow. So I think asking the question to them, like, and then working on how do you remedy that.
Right. And also, if somebody really is burnt out, this again goes back several slides on how to have a difficult conversation.
Right.
Because it is time.
Right.
Right. And there is a loving way to do this, and that is saying things like, I have noticed you have been acting fill in the blank. You seem upset, you seem tired, you seem like you're lashing out, you seem like you don't care, whatever those things are. And these are some signs of burnout, and I'm concerned for your health. I'm worried about you.
Yeah.
Right. And then talk about it. And this could be the very first seed toward helping that person exit the program gracefully.
Yeah.
Because if you've got a burned out advocate, that is a really, really bad thing.
And I'd rather be a reference to you than not. Right.
Yes.
So let's do it.
Yes. We have another question. As we do work in the field, we are often have coworkers and staff who are themselves survivors. Do you have a webinar that you offer on how to have challenging, hard conversations with survivors we are working with, and how to navigate those in ways that are helpful for both sides to feel heard instead of triggered? I think that's technical assistance issue. Like, you can talk to Deidre about it. She comes out and does TA for agencies as her schedule permits.
Yeah.
And I know that we've done webinars and training that does address that. But again, and if you're just looking for help around language on how to have those difficult conversations,
Oh, I could totally help.
yeah, that's definitely something called Deadria about.
Or send me an email and we could talk about it more. We can set up some time to talk about it. Because I do think sometimes that can be challenging, but we can work through that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys have been awesome. Thank you so much for being with us today. We've got some great feedback. People say that we're really funny, so that's great. We would sing the Carol Burnett song, Goodbye So Long, but I don't really know the words to that. So
we're pulling on our earlobes.
Yeah, we're pulling on our earlobes, if you know what that means.
If not, see, that's a generational thing right there.
Totally, Carol Burnett.
Totally.
So please fill out your evaluation forms. Give us feedback.
Like specific feedback like we talked about earlier that is so valuable as a supervisor to a staff. We would love what worked for you, what didn't work for you.
Right.
We would love specific feedback, please.
If you want to call me, I'm 1 ringy dingy, 2 ringy dingy, whatever. Call me. I'm totally open, but give me your feedback. Thank you guys so much. You've been awesome.
Yes.
And
thanks.
tell all their friends they missed out.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. Thanks. Great 2 hours, you guys. Have a great day.
Thanks, you guys.
Bye.
Bye.